Hello, this is Pupunup again with another game developer interview. This time I have with me Tyler Mire from Something Classic, which they recently launched their new game, Shadows of Adam, which is a JRPG, a first for this channel. How are you, Tyler?
Doing great.
So usually what I'll do is I'll go with some icebreaker questions first. So what are your favorite games and JRPGs of all time?
Okay, so games. Let's start outside JRPG genre. Off the top of my head, my favorite games are Super Mario 64, GoldenEye.
Is that your first console?
No, my first console was a Sega Genesis. Well, I guess my older siblings had a regular Nintendo, which I was too young to really play. But then I had a Sega, and then a 64, which are a lot of my favorite games. So yeah, those two are probably still games I love to play today. As far as JRPGs go, I mean, pretty much all the standards. Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy 4, 6, 7, 9 are my favorite Final Fantasies. I love the Earthbound a lot. I feel like I'm forgetting one. I'm Pokemon. I love the Pokemon series a lot. I've tried to get into Breath of Fire multiple times, but for whatever reason, it never really does it for me. I need to replay the PS1 Breath of Fire 3. I remember that being a very good game, but for some reason I never got too far into it.
And what are your... So this question is because you're the composer of Shadows of Adam. So what are your favorite OSTs?
Well, obviously Chrono Trigger, which is one of the most excellent. Chrono Trigger, I like a lot of Nobuo Uematsu's work. I thought his 4 and 6 were really strong soundtracks. I forget her name, but the composer who wrote the music for Super Mario RPG, that's a really nice soundtrack. It's perfect for the game. I love the original Mario theme, Koji Kondo. I think that music is timeless and a great example of how much mileage you can get out of just strong melodies. The more modern stuff I haven't listened to as much. I think it's really interesting because it's more orchestral and cinematic, which is wonderful. But I have definitely a soft spot for more like the 16-bit era and before, I think.
Yoko Shimomura is her name.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Also, I guess I have to give a shout out to the other composer who did the Street Fighter 2 music. I was recently rewatching that meme where they were playing Guile's theme with all these different. Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah,
I just want to like punch the air when I hear that song.
Right. There's a what's his name? There's a YouTuber, Smooth McGroove. Do you know the guy?
Oh,
Yeah, he did the Guile theme, which is really freaking awesome.
Yeah, he's pretty amazing. Kudos to him.
So you're the composer for Something Classic Games, and you guys just released Shadows of Adam, which is a JRPG on Steam, and also a DRM free version on Humble. You can get that on Humble, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So tell the people listening, what is Shadows of Adam? What kind of game it is? What's the story about? What's the mechanics and all that?
Sure. So the simplest way to put it is Shadows of Adam is like your favorite 16-bit JRPG, but designed for the modern player. So we took all the things that were great about those games, the great pixel art, the great music, the fun, the turn-based battles, and sort of try to modernize it with a few more convenient features such as no random battles. All battles are on the screen. No need for grinding, so there's not arbitrary level caps that you have to meet to defeat bosses. Skills that are useful the entire game. So, for instance, at level 1, Azrael, the main heroine, learns the move Lightning, and that move is useful the entire game. There's no Lightning, Lightning 2, Lightning 3, Lightning 4000 nonsense.
Right.
So that's also the ability to save everywhere, which is kind of a thing you don't really think about, but our personal stories as developers of these games is we're all in our late 20s, early 30s. So when we were playing these games, we were age 8 to 13.
We had
We
time.
had a lot of time. We had time. We're making a game for people that may have grown up loving those games and maybe doesn't have as much time, and we don't want to penalize them for that. So we
Right.
wanted to make a game that was streamlined and cut the fat out and didn't waste your time. So I would say retro JRPG, 16-bit era, but made for the modern gamer.
Have you played any of the newer JRPG? Bravely Default did a couple of new stuff, like you can grind much easier. Have you played any of those?
I played like 30 minutes of Bravely Default on my brother's PSP, I believe. I didn't
it
get
came out for
really.
the 3DS.
Oh, I'm sorry, 3DS. Yeah. I didn't play enough to really get a huge sense of it, but I got just that it was kind of a throwback, but with some modern tweaks. It seemed very interesting. I think that's neat that they're still doing those sort of turn-based battles. I understand why Square Enix might want to push the genre forward and try new things, and that's totally wonderful. But I love turn-based combat personally,
Right.
so I need to play that game, I guess.
Yeah, it's really good. It takes a while for you to get used to the job mechanic, the job changing mechanic. Eventually, you'll get a sense of what each character you want them to be, what kind of job you want them to be. There's quite a bit of grinding, but they do have like the fast forward and all that, and the auto battles. It makes it really easy. You can literally, I sometimes do work while just moving the the directional pad just to encounter random enemies.
Nice.
So tell us a bit about how you got started making. This is your first game, right? You individually, this is the first game you made, or made music for, or just worked on before. Is it?
Well, yeah, this is the first commercially released game that I personally worked on. Tim, our art director, worked for Zynga, and so he was responsible for a lot of mobile games and social media games. So the story of Something Classic kind of goes back to maybe like as far back as like 2002 when we were all preteens. We were members of an RPG Maker community called Gaming World. And just a quick disclaimer, because we get asked this a lot, Shadows of Adam is not an RPG Maker game, and that's not said in any sort of animus whatsoever. It's a JavaScript game. So, but anyways, we were all in the RPG Maker forum. Me, Josh Garlitz, Tim Windorf, and Luke Watchholtz. Me and Josh must have made about 4 or 5 unfinished games on RPG Maker, and some I actually wrote the music for as far back as like being 15, 16 years old. Wow. So after years and years of just like toying with RPG Maker, really falling in love with game development, we reconnected in 2013, and Josh was like, he added me on Facebook. He said, "Hey man, I really want to start a new project. I want to do like at the time it was going to be an 8-bit mobile game." He's like, "I want to do an 8-bit mobile game. I think there's a niche for that." He's like, "Would you be interested?" I said, "Yeah, man." So I went home that night and I composed the battle theme for what would be the battle theme for Shadows of Adam. I was like really, really excited. One thing led to another. I was on that old Gaming World forum, and I randomly posted looking for an old game that Tim had created back in the early 2000s called Whack-A-Food 2. It was a sequel that never saw the light of day, and it was the most incredible game I'd ever seen in RPG Maker. So I posted on this thread saying, "Does anyone have this game? Anyone know where it is?" And that same day, Tim saw that post. And this is a forum that had been basically a ghost town for years, and I hadn't posted on it in years. He hadn't checked it in months. So the timing was just really coincidental. He saw that post that day, and he messaged me, and we started talking. I said, "Hey, man, me and Josh are starting this new game, and we would really like some pixel art. Would you be into that?" He said, "Yeah, I just love Zynga, and I was kind of looking to do some pixel art." And so one thing led to another. Tim was a part of the team, and then he brought in Luke, who was a great story writer from a RPG classic called The Way, which still has fans to this day. It's kind of unbelievable. And then eventually we brought in our last team member, Ty Darren, who's a great programmer from Canada. And that's basically how Something Classic started.
Oh, everything just fell into place, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a match made in heaven, I suppose. I remember with each additional member we added, it felt like a missing piece was sort of filled. And we all sort of had our specialties. Like I'm a musician by trade, and so my job was mainly as composer. But I ended up doing a lot of other things. I did a lot of QA. I did a lot of testing. I did a lot of scene design. So I actually coded most of the scenes. Luke, who was originally just brought on as a contract worker to write our script, ended up being hired full time and doing all our level design. So every map in the game is made by Luke, and he also designed all our puzzles. Tim, who was just going to be an art consultant, ended up being the main art director, hired all our contract work, kind of established a look for our game, and made sure all the artists working under him got that theme right. And he ended up designing pretty much all our battle mechanics. So all the skills, all the monster AI, all the basics of combat he came up with. And Ty and Josh just did everything we asked them. Fix bugs, program stuff, made sure we got a Steam build up. So yeah, it was a great team, and we all kind of complement each other very well, I think.
Right. So there's basically in the description of the game, you said that the game is inspired mainly by Mystic Quest and Chrono Trigger, right?
Yeah, we kind of list those because they're easier games to think of, and they have some strong elements that we might have taken from. But I would say this game is inspired by a lot of games. I think we chose Mystic Quest, and we get that comparison a lot, mainly for two reasons. One, the top-down battle view, where you're facing the enemy. That's also in Lufia as well. We get that comparison a lot as well. So, and also, monsters are on the screen, but they're not like free roaming like they are in Chrono Trigger. They're blocking like choke points, which to my knowledge, I think Mystic Quest might have been the only game that did that. I'm trying to think of another game that had. Yeah, so there's that. Another thing that we took from Mystic Quest, which is kind of subtle in our game, is that I don't know if you remember this, but when you did enough damage to a monster or a boss in Mystic Quest, they had like a weak pose. Like you could physically see the boss sprite change to show that it was getting weaker.
Right.
In our game, you can't see the HP of bosses unless you use mind read. So one visual way to kind of tell the story to the player that the boss was getting weaker was that our boss sprites literally get their sprites change.
Right.
And that's a kind of a nice takeaway from Mystic Quest. As far as Chrono Trigger, I mean, it's just such an iconic game, and we would never claim to be on the level of Chrono Trigger. However, one thing I think Chrono Trigger did very well is that it's a fairly short and condensed straight-ahead RPG. It's 15, 20 hours of gameplay?
Yeah.
Every quest is really tight. The pacing is really tight. It's very well presented. It's a very well-constructed game. So that was kind of an influence of ours. I mean, our Shadows of Adam is definitely on the shorter side, I suppose. It's a 10 to 16-hour game. But I don't think that's unprecedented. So I think that's why we sort of mentioned Chrono Trigger and Mystic Quest. And if I would say one other one that maybe influenced us big time was Super Mario RPG, for kind of the aforementioned reasons. Just streamlined, fun, straight ahead, no nonsense kind of RPG experience.
So can you explain a bit about your work environment, your workspace, the hardware, software they use personally for you to make the music, as well as any game development stuff and communication tools that you use between the team?
Sure. Well, I guess I'll just start with the music. So I use two music programs. I use Finale, which is a sheet music software, which would seem kind of weird for game music, but my background is as a jazz composer and a professional trumpet player, so I'm very comfortable reading and writing sheet music. And also Logic, which is a digital audio workstation that I use on my MacBook Pro. I did kind of a combination. Sometimes I'd start the music in Finale and then export the MIDI data into Logic and then use samples and do mixing and such. There were a few tunes. One that comes to mind right off the top of my head is the opening dungeon, the Tangle. I actually, instead of writing sheet music first, I just took a little MIDI keyboard and played it into my laptop. I did that to sort of see if the change of process would kind of make me more creative, and it actually did make me compose differently. It was very interesting. As far as something classic dev tools, I mean, we communicate mainly through Slack. We all live in different parts of the country, so I'm in the DC area, Luke's in Kansas, I believe. Tim, I believe, is in Oregon. Josh is in Pennsylvania, and Ty is in Canada.
Mm.
So we never met in person during game dev. We worked through Slack. We used Trello to keep track of game tasks.
Right.
Lots of emails. We have regular meetings where we assign tasks. I suppose you could say I'm sort of the de facto team leader, so I do a lot of delegation.
Mm.
So, for instance, if we had say there was a need met, we needed to tweak a dungeon puzzle or something, I might say, hey, Luke, can you get this done? Or if there's a bug, I might say, Josh, can you check this out? Or such and such. This was coded in Impact.js, so JavaScript. So I can't talk too technical about the details because I'm just a composer. Right. But I know a lot of people are curious about that.
So what's a typical workday when you were making a game? Because you guys were not doing this full time, right? You were doing it part time, and you are actually a full time musician.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your typical workday? Like, how much time were you able to put aside for Shadows of Adam?
I don't know if there ever was a typical day, to be honest. It was just sort of, yeah, we were doing this part time. All of us had full time jobs or gigs. There were times throughout the 3.5 years of development where we were definitely more productive than others. I remember our original goal was to get the game out late fall of 2016, and we missed that deadline. And when it started getting to like late October, November, we said, okay, there's no point in pushing it out in December, and there's no point in putting it out in January because that's pretty much a dead month. And that December, I remember getting hired for a show that basically had me playing like 40 shows in December. So I just kind of took that month off from Something Classic. But we were pretty good at deadlines. Like we set a February 23rd deadline, and I remember the most productive and organized we ever got was like 4 weeks before that. The game was done, and all I wanted to do was have a rotating list of people testing different areas, so we covered the entire game like 5-6 times before we released. So I drew up like a testing matrix, and I split the game into 5 sections. And on a 4-week schedule, I basically assigned everyone a section for 4 weeks. So I think at the end of the 4 weeks before we went out, everyone had played through the entire game. So that was like 5 full play tests. And what we would do would be like, so say someone was in the 3rd section, and they knew such and such was playing the 2nd and was going to play the 3rd section next week. They would maybe make notes, say, I saw this weird thing. This is how I did it. When you play through it next week, can you try to replicate this?
Right.
And then we found a few edge case things that way. I remember kind of having like a mini panic because we switched our audio engine like 4 weeks before the game because it was just not really working for what we needed. And in doing so, everything seemed to get better, but except there was this one weird glitch that popped up like 4 or 5 weeks before we released, where the music would just stop playing, like completely. We didn't know why. And it would only happen like an hour and a half in or something. And there seemed to be no sort of like consistent
trigger
things we couldn't figure it out. And so like literally, I remember us getting, well, programmers, you got to figure this out. Like, we don't even know where to start. Like, is it in the music code? Is it in this code? Like, we have no consistent variables. So we were freaking out because we're like, we can't release this. Like, and then it ended up being some stupid thing where like one line of code had the word true, and you had to change it to false. That was it. Boom, fixed. But that was kind of panicking before that. So
yeah. So was there a worry from you guys that this game was going to be labeled not RPG Maker on Steam? We've seen this before. Did you guys had that worry? Because like you said, you got a lot of questions. Is this an RPG Maker game? Because it's a really popular thing to use these days, and there's so many JRPGs coming out pretty much every day on Steam.
Right. Well, I mean, we couldn't really worry about it. It's the comparison that's going to be made. We knew that we were probably going to get some folks who thought this was RPG Maker, and for better or worse, would just not want to touch it. Right. All we could do is just try to make the quality of the game as high as possible. And yeah, that was basically our philosophy. It was like, look, we'll just make the best game we can and make it look as professional and polished as possible. And we can't worry too much about that. And we don't want to send any ill vibes to our RPG Maker friends. I mean, we
Right.
started in that community when we were in our teens. But
Right.
yeah, I think perhaps because RPG Maker lowers the barrier of entry as far as coding understanding, which is totally great. It allows a lot more quantity of products to get out into the world, and perhaps, because there's a bigger pool, you're not
Right.
getting as many good games. But I remember like the first week we launched on Steam, there was this like Steam discussion thread, and literally all the thread was the title was like, "Is this an RPG Maker game?" And we responded like, "Nope, this is Impact JS." And then it was literally like 4 pages of people just arguing about this, and it was very unproductive. And
Right.
we basically said, "Look, everyone's entitled to their opinion. If you don't want to play a game, it's because it's RPG Maker. That's fine. But this is an RPG Maker." And we just blocked it. We just locked the topic. I mean,
So even after you said that it's not RPG, there was still a debate about it.
yeah. Well, the debate
Right.
kind of devolved into like,
Does it
if
matter if it's not being
if does
made
it matter
RPG?
if it's RPG
Right, right.
Maker? And then the debate was, one guy was like, "Well, if I know it's RPG Maker, I'm not going to play it." And some people were like, "Well, that's a little unfair." And me personally, I think that's a little unfair too. I understand the reasoning, but anyway, that's what it
Right.
basically devolved in. It was so silly, but for the most part, everyone's been very sweet, very cool. The RPG Maker community has been very supportive of us too. Yeah, it's been great, but it's not an RPG Maker game, so
Yeah, it's. I guess you can't really blame them because they do want like quality, and RPG, for better or worse, RPG Maker these days means, I guess, low quality to a lot of people, especially because if it's on Steam. But To the Moon, one of the best games ever made, is an RPG
yeah,
Maker game, which is
yeah,
freaking insane. Yeah,
To the Moon, and Luke's old game, The Way, was an RPG Maker game. It wasn't a commercial game, but that was
can you
wildly
find that
hailed.
anywhere?
Yeah,
The
I
Way.
think if you just search, if you go to rpgmaker.net, I'm pretty sure that The Way is on there. And I, I say this in every interview, I still haven't played the game. So I'm sorry, Luke. But I hear it's really good. I mean, he's made this game like 12 years ago, and there's still people posting on his Facebook page about how great the game is. So, I mean, that's must say something, I think.
Right.
But
So what was the main idea when when you guys were designing the combat system? What were you trying to achieve there?
so we wanted a combat system that was fast and strategic and didn't require grinding. So, we also wanted a combat system that encouraged skill use. A lot of games, I feel like, sort of make you hoard your best spells and skills because you're saving them for the
For the
boss.
boss, yeah.
And we didn't want that. So our AP system is based on a finite amount. So every character has 100 AP, and that never changes unless you get certain artifacts. And your skills are anywhere from 5 to 80 AP. And but the thing is, every round you restore 15 AP, and every time you defeat an enemy, that character gains 5. So there's this like kind of give and take. And so
Right.
what happened is the metagame sort of evolved in a way where you're constantly encouraged to use skills. It's also sort of like has the Pokemon system where every skill has like a quote unquote type. So for instance, Curtis has a lot of chakra type moves, and chakra is good against ghost types. They're not technically ghost types, but anytime you see like a skeleton or a ghost,
Like a
you can't hit them with
ghost.
physical.
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah. Or fire is good against them. That's just everyone knows that.
Yeah.
So yeah, we wanted to be fast and strategic. We never wanted there to be a moment where you just died at a boss, and the reason was because you weren't high enough level. Because we could control how many monsters you theoretically have to fight to get to the boss because they're in choke points, we built the balance around that. So I remember going through the game, and my goal was to fight the minimum amount of battles and be able to beat the boss if I played very well. If that makes sense. It would be challenging, but if I was smart and knew strategies, knew their weaknesses, knew resistances, figured out their AI patterns, that you could beat it. And I've seen this again and again with players on stream and on YouTube. Strategic playing is way more important than being overleveled. You can overlevel, I guess, if you want to keep re-entering the dungeon 1,000 times. It's very tedious.
Hmm.
So our game sort of discourages it until the end game. But yeah, we want it fast, fun, and strategic. And I think a nice thing about our game is that, like I mentioned earlier, is that your skills are useful the entire game. So the skills that Kellen and Azrael start out with, for instance, Kellen has a move called Cleave. That move will be used throughout the entire game. It never becomes useless. There's not like a Cleave 2 or anything. So
Right.
I think that's a interesting take, because I remember, as much as I love like Final Fantasy games, you get to the end of the game and have like 40 magic spells and literally only 2 are useful.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So it's like, what's the point?
Hmm.
And so we didn't want that, you know. Like definitely are like really great skills you learn in the end game, like, but for most of our skills, I would say all have a unique function. So for instance, the mage character Azrael, she learns, I think, 3 elemental spells. One is lightning. It's a single target. Big damage, single target. Pretty straight ahead. Then she learns flare. Slightly less damage, but AoE. Then she learns blizzard. A little bit more damage than flare, with chance to lower magic defense. And then she learns like a move called Eclipse, which is non-elemental damage, but has a chance to cause blind. So there's just like slightly different things. Kellen's also another interesting example, because he has a move called Cleave, which I mentioned before, which basically does more damage the more HP an enemy has. So
Okay.
it has like a 5% bonus applied to the enemy's max HP. Or, sorry, current HP. So the more the HP they have left, the more damage it will do. If that makes sense. So as they
Right.
get weaker, that 5% bonus gets less. However, his final move called Final Light, it works in reverse. So it does more damage the more missing HP the enemy has. So it's a good finisher move. One little strat I'll give to anyone who watches this is, like, for instance, if you're fighting like a really tough boss that has a lot of HP and you're getting down to the wire, that might be the best time to use Final Light. That's when you're going to see your biggest gains. If that makes sense. So you might open up with Cleave, start doing those bonuses, and then at the end of the battle, when the boss is missing 40,000 HP, use that Final Light. You're going to see some big damage. So,
Who was the combat designer?
Tim, our art director, did majority of the combat work. He didn't do the coding per se, but he designed all the skills.
The skills, right?
We all sort of had inputs and thoughts about it, but Tim was kind of the brains behind it and really did a wonderful job. One of our main comments we get on reviews is that the combat is really good, really fun and strategic. The gameplay is very fun. And then people always ask me, like, how do you balance the game? And the only answer I can give to that is I literally just played through the game hundreds of times. And I just try to use my gut. It's got to feel smooth. It's got to feel easy. Not easy, natural, rather. And it can't feel cheap. Like,
Right.
when you die, you shouldn't be mad. You should be, okay, I know what I'm going to do next time. There was one boss that we actually pushed out in our first version of the full game, the water boss, who had an insta-death move, which was a 100% chance to a single target. And those moves can be okay, but the AI was worked in a way where if you had 100% of your HP, he targeted that character instantly. So there was a chance he would use it twice in one round. So I would watch people play, and he would just insta-kill 2 guys right away. And people were just dying left to right through no fault of their own. And I had to convince Tim. I said, look, Tim, in theory, this is very cool. But everyone's getting frustrated, and they're not having fun, and they're losing, and it's not their fault. So we eventually patched that. But for the most part, if there's anything like that in the
So there's a you guys have like a rule where it's basically simple done well, right? That's like your rule. So why simple done well? Number one. Number two, have you guys had like really long debates where what mechanics or what element of the game that you guys really wanted to put in there, but because of that rule, you just had to we had to take it out?
Yeah. So the simple done well was our kind of design philosophy.
Right.
I think there's kind of 2 reasons for that. One is that it just was the design aesthetic for our game. It was supposed to be a honest, sincere, straightforward game. that kind of cut the fat out. So simple can sound derogatory, but our spin was it was simple, as in straightforward and easy to play and fun, but done very, very well. So a lot of polish and not cutting corners for the sake of making a quote unquote simple game. To your second question, yeah, there were tons of debates, man. I mean, throughout 3.5 years, there were, I mean, it was passionate debates, and it was great. I mean, I feel like from adversity and argument, not argument, but debate comes creativity and consensus. There were lots of times where one of us would propose a new mechanic or suggest something new in a battle system or a new skill, and we always had to say, okay, is this the time we have to spend doing that? Is it worth the art? Is it worth the return on investment? Is it conveying our central design premise? Is it fit the theme of our game? And then, you know, we would debate that. And then sometimes we'd even debate what simple done well means. I mean, does that mean that we don't have any depth in our battle system? Well, we didn't agree with that. So, yeah, it was definitely like a lot of debate. I remember when we were nearing the end of last year, there were a couple battles and monsters we had to finish up the logic for. And Tim had written down a lot of he basically just put a list of every monster in the game, the kind of envisioned AI and moves they would have. And when I went through the whole list and I found about 20 things that seemed like they were going to be pretty difficult. And I sent an email to the team. I said, all right, guys, yay or nay, or is this going to stay in the game? Because I envision all these things are going to take a long time. And so we cut about 95% of them. Just boom.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it sounds kind of draconian, I suppose, but I mean, you could keep developing till the cows come home. There was no shortage of creativity on our team. Like we come up with the greatest ideas. Like I remember the water boss was going to have a move where he like submerged you underwater for a little bit, and I don't or stole a character. And there's there's amazing ideas, but then we're looking at like literally designing new systems for one boss mechanic. Is it worth it? Maybe. Or how about we just take an idea we already have, retheme it, rework it, so that the player already has like a sense of familiarity with it. It themes well, and also it saves us time. And I don't want to make it sound like we're lazy, because we're not. It's just when you're 5-man team and you're developing something as expansive as an RPG, you have to think logically about everything, because you know we don't have the dev resources that like say Breath of the Wild did, where they can really, you know, anything they think they can do. That was a great question, though. Thanks.
That's a really interesting. I think it's a really good philosophy for a lot of indie developers to take up, because a lot of them they get really excited. They come up with all these crazy ideas, and then when they look at the list, they just feel really overwhelmed, and then just I'm not gonna do this. So I think that's a really interesting design philosophy, and I also feel that indie developers, especially when you have a lack of resources, you find creative ways to like go around it, think outside the box. So I think overall it's a really, really cool philosophy. So you mentioned this, you guys made this game for like 3.5 years, and you actually had a Kickstarter, right? You asked for $20,000, you got $22,000, about that. So what was that money mainly for? Was it for like all the outside expenses, like contractors, maybe like people to market the game, some ads? Is it mainly for that? Because you guys were doing like full-time jobs as well.
Yeah, mainly outsourcing needs. As you might guess, JRPGs have a ridiculous amount of art assets needed.
Right.
And Tim is an amazing artist, but he simply just didn't have the time to do everything. So I think it's maybe 2 to 3, maybe 4 artists had working under him in different areas. And before the Kickstarter, we had maybe spent about 10 grand of our own money. Mainly Tim. He made the investment he believed in the game. He made this investment, about 10 grand, so we could have a really nice demo with good assets and develop like a color palette and a visual look. So most of it was like recouping that and paying additional art assets. I mean, we had a lot of art assets at the Kickstarter time, but we still had like all the battle backgrounds, all the remaining monsters, all the skills. I mean, there's probably 40 skills in the game if you're not including monster skills, so all they'll have unique animations. We reused as much as we could. We did palette swaps, which also helped kind of tie in, like I was mentioning, like the Pokemon types. So that's another way where you were mentioning like limitations make you creative, which I totally am a believer of. If we had infinite resources, like literally every monster could have been unique, hand drawn, but also there's no harm in like reusing a palette and re-theming it because that also introduces a familiar element to the player. So they're looking at it and they go, "Hey, I've seen this kind of monster before. I saw him 3 dungeons ago. Wasn't he weak to chakra? Let me try that." Oh, you're already establishing like you're teaching players a mechanic.
Right.
As far as other yeah, we hired a great sound effect guy, Austin Shannon, who had done some AAA projects, and man, I think he knocked it out the park. And I am so glad, me personally. There was actually debate about this, not whether Austin was good enough, but whether we wanted to spend the money about hiring a sound guy. And my argument was, I mean, think about your favorite games. Like Chrono Trigger comes to mind. When you hit the enemy and it's like this perfectly timed sound effect, it really makes you like real excited. So like I said, we have these really unique skill animations. I want our sound effects to be timed for that animation. I don't just want to like find a generic magic sound and make it work. So like literally when we hired Austin, we just sent him like animated GIFs of all the animations and said like, here's the animation. It's kind of what we envision it. Can you time it out to that? So I think that's another thing that helps the graphic presentation. So yeah, mainly that, and there was some marketing that we spent money on. We hired a marketing guy, but mainly art. I would say was probably 80% of that Kickstarter budget for sure.
That was really interesting when, what you said about the sounds, because I feel sound when it's not good, you'll realize that. When it's good, you'll be like, you just play the game and it's like normal. But when it's not good, you totally notice it. Because
Yeah.
I was playing this demo for another JRPG that is gonna come out soon, and I really hated the sound work because the guns. I'm not sure if it was gonna be. I'm not sure if the sound is just a placeholder, but for the sounds of the gunshot, they put in a firecracker sound. And being from Malaysia, when there's a lot of Chinese people and when it's Chinese New Year, there's a
Yeah.
lot of firecrackers outside
Right.
my house, and it gets really, really annoying. And I just think back to those times where I just can't sleep or anything. It just pissed me off. So yeah, that's a very interesting thing about sound. You just said that. So a little bit about the story. How did you guys start developing the story? What was the process? Did you have like a skeleton frame and then just filled out the gaps? Was that the process?
Yeah, basically. The way the story was written is pretty interesting, and perhaps if we had redone it, we'd have maybe approached it differently. But I'm pretty happy with how it came out. The gist was that when me and Josh started this game, we knew from the beginning that this was going to be a pretty straightforward retro JRPG story, and so I basically sketched out the basic characters, their tropes, kind of their roles in battle, a few areas they might visit. But I had like a very loosey-goosey plot. All I remember thinking was like, it's going to be about this main character and his dad's missing, and there's this magic book they find, and that is the impetus for their journey. When we hired Luke, we hired him as a contract guy, and just sent him this basic like bulletin point skeleton of the story, and said, "Hey man, can you write a script for this?" And so he took it and changed a few things. He added some areas. He took some areas away. He added some new characters. He kind of developed some subplots. He added some flashback sequences. He really, really fleshed it out. But he stuck pretty much to what we wanted for the most part. He kind of added this like theme about magic, that magic having this like kind of evil connotation, and that was it, man. And I think he knocked it out the park. Luke's an incredible craftsman of words, and yeah, so that was essentially how we did it. He was hired as a contractor, but then we liked it so much, we said, well, why don't we just have you be part of the team? And he started developing maps, and
Right.
he was really good at like tying everything to the story. I think like everything from dungeon design to like presentation of the story. We had a big philosophy that was, show not tell. Um, we wanted to we never wanted there to kind of be a point in the story where you weren't sure what was happening or you didn't know where to go. So that was definitely a big moment. But yeah, that was kind of our unique uh, genesis of our story creation.
Um, is there like a specific script writing software that you guys use that maybe makes it easy with the UI and like seeing changes like before and after? Was there such a thing that you guys use?
No, not really. I mean,
Just normal
when
documents?
yeah, it was like a Google Excel sheet when Luke
Mm,
sent it. We had some dev tools, really basic, that where we could copy the formatted Excel sheet and put it into this thing, and it would generate the code for it. And
right.
then we'd have to literally like go test the game. I mean, I remember one of my main gigs in the team was to just take the script Luke wrote and like literally construct the scene. So it'd be like starting with that basic framework of just the text, then adding like timing, making sure the timing was right, moving props around, music cues, and just like I remember there's a big story sequence with Curtis in this really long flashback, which I think has like 4 or 5 scenes just back to back to back to back. And that man, I probably played through that like 100 times, getting the timing right. Because like I mean, I don't know anything about filmmaking, but I imagine it's kind of similar. Like, like you have these sprites talking to each other, and one turns to the left to talk. Well, you got to give it a second so you see the sprite turn, and then he
Mm,
talks or she talks. So just like kind of that trial and error. Our dev tools weren't great, so there definitely was a lot of like tedium to working on this, I will say. But yeah, no real fancy dev tools in that regard.
right. Um, so yeah, let's talk about the music. Who inspired you to make this Shadows of Adam OST, as well as like how did you get how did you get started just making something from scratch?
I guess I'll start with the second question.
Right.
So I started playing music in fifth grade, which I was 11 in the States. Yeah, 11 years old. I started playing trumpet because my older friends played it. I thought it was kind of cool. And since then, man, I was just kind of fascinated by music composition.
Mm.
I would write music for the school band, and I had a little keyboard that I played into my computer. So I made a lot of like MIDIs, if you remember those way back in the day.
Yeah.
And that was like I remember doing a lot of RPG Maker games and writing the music for it. None of it was particularly great, but I remember having like pretty good instincts, but like little theoretical knowledge, if that makes sense. So
Right.
like and that's I think instincts are more important than theoretical knowledge. But I did go to college and I got a master's degree in jazz composition, so that kind of filled in my gaps. But I've always trusted my gut. Um, I don't know, man. As far as like just creating from nothing, you just got to take the first step. You know, it's easier than ever to hear your music because the barrier to entry has been lowered so much. So you can just get Logic for $100, a little MIDI keyboard, and just start playing music and just trying stuff. I hear the guy who wrote the music to Undertale was completely self-taught, and that music sounds
Oh
pretty
yeah.
good.
Oh yeah.
I
It's like
was
it's one of my favorite OST in the past couple of years. It's really really good.
yeah, yeah. I was very impressed. I could tell this guy just had a lot of great instincts, a lot of creativity.
Mm.
Um, as far as like what inspired was the question, what inspired like specifically Shadows of Adam's OST?
Yeah, specifically, yeah. It can be both, like for yourself and as well as the game.
Well, I love jazz. I mean, I'm a professional jazz trumpet player. So that's my background is as a jazz composer. I love jazz. There's not a lot of jazz in Shadows of Adam, but the kind of maybe there's some elements of the harmony that are there hidden. But I also, like I mentioned, when I was younger, I mean, I played a lot of video games, and I always say this in interviews. The older music, I think, has a special charm to me because the
Right,
limitations of the software forced them to just write great music. They didn't have
right. It has great melody.
eight exactly great melodies. Great melodies. I mean, they had so little space. Their samples weren't that great, but everyone in the freaking world knows the original Mario Brothers theme or the
Right.
Legend of Zelda. So I was definitely inspired by very melodic composition, the use of what's called leitmotif, which is
Mm.
actually something from opera, if you're familiar, where essentially like a certain character or a theme has like a certain melody associated with that.
Okay.
Um, it was a way to like if a character came on stage, the orchestra would play like a little snippet of their melody so that the
Right.
audience associated that music with the character. One of the
Mm,
most famous JRPGs that did that was Final Fantasy VI, if you recall.
right, right.
I mean, Terra's theme and Locke's theme. So that was a big influence, and just I don't know, writing the Shadows of Adam OST was just so much fun. I mean, because our game is relatively short, every area is like completely unique. So there's not like five caves in the game. Like every dungeon is completely different. So I was tasked with like, I mean, we have a misty filled woods, a lava cave, a haunted swamp, a water garden. Um, there's like an element where you're like sneaking around guards and stuff. So like there was all these weird like things. So I had to really like sit down and try to figure it out. And just you trust my instincts, trial and error. Talk to Luke for story advice on characters. There's a particular character, excuse me, Malville, who he sent me like a long draft of his story, his characteristics, what he imagined the music would sound like. We did that back and forth with a lot of characters. Curtis's theme was the same way. He actually sent me like clips of film music that he wanted me to try to listen to. So there's a lot of help from them as well. So I don't know, just for anyone who wants to do it,
Was
just do it.
the Ezreal's theme, Ezreal's Dilemma, is it called?
hmm hmm
Is that sort of like your most jazzy composition?
I guess I suppose so. There's some sort of dissonance in it. I mean, I think the most like, if I had to say jazzy, I don't know, like the theme for Magna Sanctum is it like a 12/8 Afro-Cuban, which Afro-Cuban music and jazz has long been a musical genres that have fused a lot. Um, I don't know. It's hard to say, man. Like, I mean, nothing exists in a vacuum, right?
Right,
So it's not like it's jazz or it's this. Like, I feel like
right.
music is so universal. Like, all music from all over the world, from all these different parts of, have all kind of come together in some way. So, like, my experience as a jazz musician and listening to video game music, it all comes out some way. But I don't know if I was specifically thinking of like jazz when I wrote Azrael's Dilemma. I was actually probably, I don't know what I was thinking of. I think that was another thing where Luke sent me a reference track to try to emulate. So
Mm,
maybe Talon's theme is kind of jazzy. It's kind of got like a little swing thing.
right.
It's supposed to be like a swanky club where like all these
Mm,
hooligans play dice and stuff. So it's kind of,
right, right, right.
kind of that vibe.
Um, so what's the dream in terms of music? Is it working on a specific franchise or working with a specific composer, musician? Is there something like that for you?
Hmm. Honestly, man, I just want to write cool music. Yeah, I mean, if I one day got the call to compose Final Fantasy 27, that would be cool. Uh, which probably by then would be like a
270 years later, I think.
yeah, like a sim game or something. I don't even know. Uh, yeah, I mean, I'm happy with my life right now. I had a blast writing for Shadows of Adam. I'd love to do another indie game, and I'd love to. I need an excuse to like buy new samples, so I would love another chance to do that. Um, I mean, my day job is playing trumpet. I have a good life. I don't know if I'd ever want to get into like the AAA thing. I don't even know if I'm particularly talented enough to do that, or what it would even take to do that. I'm not even
Mm,
sure. I think it's such like the freelance trumpet playing is like such a word of mouth business. You rarely get a job from an audition or an interview. But we'll see. I don't know. We'll see. I'm pretty happy with what I'm doing now. But I would like to compose another game soundtrack at some point, I think.
so just a couple more questions and I'll let you go.
Oh, sure. Oh, we're
L-
good.
Looking back on the development at at that 3.5 to 4 years, is there anything that you would do differently?
Yeah, definitely. If we were going to do it over again, I would insist that we have better developer tools. That was not very user friendly, and a lot of things that should have been easy to do took a long time. So that's definitely a regret of ours.
Are you specifically talking about the JavaScript stuff that you guys did?
Yeah, just like the map editor, the way we had to do scenes. It was like a
Right.
text editor. It was just like a lot of things that should have been really easy. Like in some instances, it would have been just easier to use RPG Maker, to be honest. Like I remember, like the set teleports in the map. You had to like set an entity, a teleport entity, then like insert the map ID, and then enter the coordinates of the other map. You couldn't just like click the space you wanted to go to, which would have been great. So I had to like literally open up the other map, look at the exact tile, write down the coordinates, and then go into the game code and look up the map ID that was assigned to that particular map in this like long array. Now, this is just a little tedious. That's fine. We did it. Yeah, maybe that, but it's hard to say, man. You know, there's of course things that, like when you work with 5 people, it's just never going to be exactly what I as an individual wanted. If this game had been exactly, I don't know, I think because of us 5 working together and challenging each other and compromising, it is what it is. I'm very, very proud of Shadows of Adam. So I don't have too many regrets.
Something super funny. RPG Maker right now is on sale on Steam, so I think
Nice.
they're listening to us.
Uh-oh.
So, last question. What's next? Are you guys, because you're not doing this full time, so technically you're not like, game development is not what you need to do to eat. So,
Right.
are you guys thinking of making a new game or expanding on Shadows of Adam?
Yeah, we're definitely going to expand on Shadows of Adam. We one of our Kickstarter backer incentives was a like an optional guild that's found in Jordora, where you could do like a battle arena and artifact crafting. We had gotten like halfway through the development of it, and we realized that it wasn't going to be ready for release, and so we decided to prioritize the main game. But that will be released as a DLC, and given to our Kickstarter backers. We also want to do a new game plus, kind of in a difficulty mode, and just a few like kind of quality of life features. But as far as other game, I don't know. It's hard to say. I never say never, but I'm actually quite interested in seeing in the next year or two if we do something as all 5 of us together again, or if we do separate projects, but somehow it's under the Something Classic brand. I think after such like an intense collaboration with the 5 of us, I think all of us are kind of itching to like maybe do our own thing. I don't know. I can't speak for everyone. I would love to work with these guys again because they're so smart and creative, and you know, I'm just lucky to have been a part of it. I mean, I just write music. I don't really know how to game design, but I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully, you know, maybe Shadows of Adam Kart. I was thinking like a Mario Kart knockoff.
Right. So yeah, thank you very much, Tyler, for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, man.
So all the links will be in the description below. You know where to find them, and yeah, check out Shadows of Adam if you're into JRPGs. And if you don't have time to play, you get to save anywhere, which is really super cool. Yeah. So yeah, thank you, Tyler, for your time, and thank you to everyone that's watching and listening to this. We'll see you next time. Bye bye.
All right. Thanks.